Dr. V.H. Worden, who had a great many suspicious happenings surrounding him, which suggest a very unlucky man, or perhaps a somewhat deranged person. You be the judge, but I think it'll be obvious. Dr. Worden practiced medicine in the heartland of Michigan, and he had been married at least 5 times. Silly guy, in his 60 years. It is not recorded from where, but the doctor received a monthly pension of $12. An astonishing amount, right? Hey, but this was the late 1890s or the early 1900s, and according to an account, this money made him quite desirable to women. If only I'd have known that's all it took. I'm not going to touch the rest of that with a 10-foot pole. Dr. Worden's first marital problem was a big one. You see, he married a woman without getting divorced from her, and that was his first wife. Now, his excuse was that his attorney indicated to him that his divorce was indeed final, but it wasn't. Now, he must have been guilty, as he served 5 years in Jackson Prison for the offense, and he garnered the reputation of being a fine prisoner whilst there. He was sentenced in Sanilac County, Michigan for bigamy, and then he married another lucky lady, Ada J. Teller, a young girl in Huron County, Michigan. It appears that Dr. Worden planned to marry again, this time to Mrs. Pritchard, but unfortunately she fell mortally ill and it was feared that she would die. So Mrs. Pritchard made an odd request of the doctor and asked the doctor to marry Phoebe, her daughter. Here's something which strikes me as very odd. Now, they called in another physician for the failing Mrs. Pritchard rather than letting her proposed husband, Dr. Worden, treat her. Were there some suspicions about Dr. Worden? It would seem like there were, and with good reason. And she recovered, though, at the care of this other physician, and it was revealed that her daughter Phoebe, or Phoebe, was only 15 years old at the time. Dr. Worden's marriage to the child was annulled right away, and so what did the doctor do? He married the buxom widow, who, by the way, was his mother-in-law. This man had got to be insane. Then there was a trial over his marriage to the child Phoebe, and the trial was held at Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And while this was taking place, Phoebe herself, whose full name was Phoebe Mary Pritchard, was in custody in county jail for immorality. So, it's not funny, and I chuckle, but it's just so crazy that it's almost humorous in a way. Anyhow, Judge Dodds gave him 10 years in Ionia, but Governor Pingree pardoned him after 3 years. He next went to Indiana and West Virginia, where he married this time to Etta Mae Bramer. And Etta abandoned her 7 children in Indiana, ranging from the ages of 17 to 7 years old of age, evidently disbelieving the stories about Dr. Worden's past, and found him evidently to be a better catch than having to take care of her 7 children. I quote now from the Clare, Michigan Sentinel, which was published on June 11th, 1903, and it says, "'Tis said that Dr. Worden has had 8 wives, and that more than once he has been married to both mother and daughter, but the truth of this is buried in the remote past. But to have had 5 wives, to have been in prison twice for matrimonial experience, to have been pardoned by 2 different governors, and now to be confronted with the charge of murder is a record not supposed to be the acquisition of an ordinary man," said, as I said, that end quote from the Clare Sentinel. In concluding, at the trial, held during the first week of October, the jury found Dr. Worden guilty and his present wife then not guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and taken to Marquette, and his wife went back to Indiana and her 7 children. I hope the children were very forgiving. So it's an unusual story from Michigan's past. Was the man a serial killer? He was in prison more than a couple times, and there were a lot of suspicions about him, and evidently they weren't just suspicions because he was proven guilty, of course, those times he went to prison. So at any rate, I hope you enjoyed this curious little bit of history, and I look forward to being with you again real soon. We have some other interesting things from Michigan's past that I want to share with you. Have a great day. God bless you all very much on the other side of that monitor. I love you, and I always will, and I'll be back with you real soon. God bless.